We had a Pokemon Switch announcement. In fact, we got 4 Pokemon Switch announcements. None of them were what any of us expected, but I don't think that's a bad thing. Allow me to explain. Or throw a tantrum, dislike, click off, and leave forever. Whatever floats your boat. I still get that sweet ad revenue, baby! Pokemon Company held a secret press conference wherein they talked about 3 Pokemon Switch games. However, despite the fact that we ultimately ended up getting 3 times the announcements than we thought we'd get, none of these games gave most Pokemon fans what they wanted. The first Pokemon game announced is what I'd imagine was the result of Pixelmon having a baby with Pokémon Rumble inside of an action RPG. It's available as a free-to-start game on Nintendo Switch and will come to mobile soon after. I toured around with it a bit during a stream with my friend Bob Wolf. Plug, go subscribe and tell him he's an old man. Also, side note, you can watch me co-host alongside Bob and Will on their weekly live gaming and comic podcast, Wolf Den Live. I was on it last night. It's up now. The game is fine for what it is. It's not what I would call my preferred game to play on Switch by any means. Honestly, unless you're starved for Switch content due to limited funds, I wouldn't recommend it. Not on Switch at least. It is 100% a mobile game through and through. And it didn't end there. We also got the names of the games I'm sure most of you have something to say about: Pokemon Let's Go Eevee and Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu. The more important version, because Pikachu is more important. Pokemon Company describes Pokemon Let's Go as games with a new style that anyone can enjoy, combined with the fun of collecting Pokemon. A lot of people don't like this. Initially, I was with them, but if I'm honest, there's a fair amount of things that made me come full circle after thinking about what it is they're going for here and what that will mean for these games, and potentially the future of the franchise. As was rumored, the key inspirations for the Pokemon Let's Go games were Pokemon Yellow, Pikachu Edition, and Pokemon GO. 2 games that share the through line of Pokemon Company and Game Freak attempting to widen the appeal of mainline Pokemon games by leveraging more of what people outside of the die-hard scene associate with Pokemon. Pokemon Yellow really doubled down on the soul of Pokemon. Pokemon in other mediums puts the mainline games to absolute shame when it comes to charm and soul. Of course, that's not to say they're completely vapid in that area, but it's hard to argue that it at least put a hell of a lot more effort into breathing life into the franchise. Pikachu's heavy implementation into the game added a level of world building that hasn't been touched on much since. Your relationship with Pikachu was much more than a game mechanic. Pikachu was your partner, and its interactions with you did everything possible for the hardware of its time to show it. Pokemon Let's Go seems to be embracing that idea with a similar concept, and it's tripling down on that concept. The animations of your chosen partner are more vibrant. Eevee joined Pikachu in the elusive Pokemon saying their name club. Game Freak finally went all in on Pokemon living in the world rather than being a mere suggestion in the alleged tall grass. They brought back the Pokemon Heart Gold and Soul Silver concept of every Pokemon following you and your team, and expanding on that, allowing for you to even ride on some of the bigger Pokemon. Side note, spoilers, Pokemon Company also announced a 2019 Pokemon Switch game. I'll get to that in a bit. But I gotta add, out of all mechanics introduced in these new games, this is the one I want to keep the most. You can even see here that you can use Charizard to bypass trainers in wild Pokemon in the overworld if you want. You can dress up your Pokemon, or at the very least your partner Pokemon. Of course, that alongside of a lot of the other stuff won't appeal to everyone, and that's okay. But we can't then deny that a fair amount of people have been clamoring for those changes, myself included, and that's not to say every change is welcome by me with welcome arms. I am more on the side of disappointment for some of the Go inspired implementations, chief of which being the obvious one. I'm not too happy about the wild encounters on the battle end, and by that I obviously mean the lack of battling. Now, I say on the side of disappointment rather than I hate everything about this Pokemon Company made this a baby game, and now I have to wait another year for a Pocket Monster game meant for adults such as myself. Because a part of me likes the option to use motion controls to throw Pokeballs at wild Pokemon. What I don't like is the complete removal of battle from the catching process, as well as the local multiplayer handicap for catching Pokemon through this new system. Which I need to preface with, I don't hate the idea of traveling with friends in a Pokemon game. I love that idea, and I've wanted it since I learned about Pokemon as a child. However, I never wanted it to be in easy mode. If anything, I wanted it to be an excuse to ramp up the difficulty. This version doesn't seem to be that. And while I'm on the subject of things that don't exactly have me jazzed alongside more multiplayer talk, I'm definitely worried by the lack of online battle talk in any of their messaging. If this game ends up being exclusively local multiplayer, I'd be extremely disappointed. I mean, come on, how else will I destroy Bob on every future stream? My last little hang up with this game before getting into the catching mechanics is the fact that I don't know how I feel about the Pokeball peripheral. The idea is novel, but depending on what they charge and whether or not it also interfaces with Pokemon Go in the way that the Go Plus does, I can't see myself purchasing one of these, especially if they steer into the idea of it being a de facto Joy-Con. I can't see myself spending $40 on exclusively having the ability to roleplay a bit. No, you're gross. How dare you? Now, catching Pokemon being simplified in a Pokemon RPG isn't exactly unprecedented. The GameCube games are beloved examples of games that simplified this process, even outside of the initial capture. The concept of catching and training a team of Pokemon was gutted in those games. The selection of Pokemon was extremely limited, and the bulk of the Pokemon you acquired were the result of stealing and purifying them from other trainers. I enjoyed those games. In hindsight, I liked them less than the whole of the Pokemon battling games, even Pokemon Stadium 2, but that doesn't change the fact that those games were good anyway. Besides that, Pokemon encounters aren't exactly responsible for the most engaging Pokemon battles in the series. In fact, most of them are tedious. Now, there's exceptions in the form of legendary Pokemon encounters, assuming you don't catch them in one shot with a Master Ball or even a Quick Ball, for being honest. The battles that make the experience what it is are the trainer battles. Most importantly, the player versus player trainer battle. Also, it's not as if they did this entirely without reason. This game, if it wasn't obvious enough to the hardcore diehard fans, is a gateway drug. This catch mechanic is familiar to most Pokemon fans, believe it or not, hardcore and casual alike. Pokemon Go has literally been downloaded over 800 million times. I think it's entirely reasonable for Game Freak to develop a stopgap game, easing people into more ambitious experiences, all the while introducing them to mechanics only found in the handheld RPGs. And no, it's not just the Gen 1ers that would benefit from this approach. 800 million is a lot of downloads. Do you think all of these people fall on either side of the worst case scenario spectrum, that is either not loving Pokemon enough to stick around or only being interested in Go because it was the trend at the time? I guarantee you thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people fell in love with Pokemon for the first time through Pokemon Go. Easing Go players into a bigger part of the Pokemon world with something familiar to ground them is a logical step to make, no matter how much existing fans may hate it. Core fans are great to have for any IP, but they aren't the end-all be-all. Acquiring and appeasing new fans is just as, if not more important than pandering to the whims of the whiny core fans. There needs to be a happy medium. Which is a good transition point to talk about the third new game or announcement of a future announcement. They announced another big Pokemon game coming in 2019. Specifically, the second half of 2019. And just like they explicitly named Pokemon Go and Pokemon Yellow as inspirations for Pokemon Let's Go, for this Pokemon game, they named Pokemon X and Y and Sun and Moon. I don't think it's a coincidence that they paired the two newest generations either. This is a bona fide Gen 8 game, and I wouldn't be opposed to seeing some of the Pokemon Let's Go mechanics integrating themselves themselves into these games either. Keep the Pokemon in the overworld. Keep the ability for Pokemon to follow and be ridden. Keep the customization, and yes, keep the catching mechanics, but with the battles to boot. Also, on a related note, I don't think this would be the last we see of the Let's Go series. I think we'll see Let's Go releases centered around the remaining regions in the Pokemon world. I can see this being Pokemon Company's Forza Motorsport and Forza Horizon relationship. Different games for different segments of their audience that people like myself can find things to love in both. There's great things they can pull from this and add to the mainline games, and there's great things that they can siphon from the older games into future Let's Go iterations. No one should have to lose, and I think Pokemon Company is adamant to ensure we all feel like we won. I sure do. But those are my thoughts. What do you think about these Pokemon announcements? Are they a hard skip for you? Are you excited? Or are they the end of life as we know it? Like in the discussion, like the video and share it with a friend who has love, hate, hope, or any other emotion associated with Pokemon on Switch. Check out our website for the team's thoughts on Pokemon Quest, and most importantly, don't forget to ring the bell and subscribe for new videos like this every Tuesday and Thursday, new podcasts every Saturday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Okay, that's it for me. See you next week.